Great. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. We're just getting going live on all the platforms. And I have a really fun topic I want to share with you. And
YouTube,
in case any of you
Facebook.
did not, notice or see that, we're going to talk about programmatic. Boy, that's a tongue twister. Programmatic ads. And because it's a very popular really topic being talked about in podcasting circles all over the place in the industry today. And I want to talk about it because a lot of people think it's like a great opportunity, and for some people it may be, but I think you'll be interested to hear for most of us it's probably not what we're looking for, but you can be the judge. All right. So
All
how
right,
we doing, Cody?
we are
ready?
streaming on all platforms. We're good to go. I'm going to hide myself and take it over.
Awesome. All right. I'm just going to get right into the topic, and then we'll have as a recording of Feed Your Brand, and then we'll have Q&A after that. Hey everyone, welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tom Hazard, your host, and today I want to talk about a subject that a lot of you existing podcasters and even aspiring podcasters have probably heard this buzzword that's been going around the podcast industry a lot in the last, I would say, 6 months to a year, because more and more podcast hosting platforms are offering this option for you to choose. And they're called programmatic ads. And really, my topic today is to not only share with you what programmatic ads are, but I want to talk about programmatic ads audience cost, meaning the cost to your audience, the cost to you as a podcaster. There's a lot of people offering this, and they say, hey, you can monetize your podcast from day one. And you can, but I want to break this down and, provide some information, sort of peel back the curtain a little bit on programmatic ads, what they really mean, what the pros and cons are, so you can make a decision if this is something you really want to participate in, because I think you might be surprised. It's not really all as rosy as it may seem when you first read about it. So what are programmatic ads? Well, I think the easiest way to explain this might be from a listener perspective. And one platform that I think a lot of podcasters are interested to be a part of, and if you already have a show, your show is probably on there, is Spotify. Now, Spotify is a little different because they're a listening app. They're a listener destination. And this is, I'm going to explain, there's a distinction here. There's a couple facets or different kinds of programmatic ads. And Spotify, if you do not have a paid account, if you have a free account, and whether you're listening to music or podcasts, and I see this a lot on podcast shows, that people use the Spotify app all the time. They're not paying for a paid account. When they when they click play to listen to an episode, they will hear an ad before that podcast is played for them. And this is true of any of you podcasters that have podcasts that are available to be listened to on Spotify. You have no control over this. You don't get paid any money for it. This is something Spotify does, and it's their way that they're trying to motivate listeners to sign up and pay for a Spotify account so that they don't have to listen to those ads. So Spotify's going to monetize the listener one way or another. You're going to pay them to a monthly amount to not have any ads served to you, or they're going to get paid by an advertiser to serve ads to any listener who wants to listen to their content on their platform. Because they're not paying, well, then the advertiser is going to pay, and the listener has to listen to some ads before they get the content. So by programmatic ad, what I'm talking about here is ads that run, usually there are some rare exceptions, but I'm going to say usually at the very beginning, before anybody ever listens or is able to listen to the content that they have clicked and chosen to listen to. So Spotify is one good example from a listener perspective. Now, there are also other platforms that are podcast hosting platforms. Now, any of you that are existing podcasters know what I'm talking about. I'm going to just, for those of you that may be listening to Feed Your Brand as a new listener, if you don't already know, every podcast has to be hosted on the internet somewhere, because the vast majority of listening apps don't keep your MP3 files in their servers to make them available to their customers, like, Apple, iHeart, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. I mean, there's TuneIn, so many different listening apps out there. There's more coming online all the time, and you can be available on all of them. But for the vast majority of them, they are just a directory and a middleman, and you need to have a podcast media host to serve your MP3 files to that listener, to upload it to them, or what they're doing is downloading it or streaming it to their device. So the podcast hosting platforms, of which Podetize is one, in full transparency, we're a state-of-the-art media host with advanced analytics, the best out there in my opinion, but there are others out there as well. And in particular, ones that are participating and have programmatic ad programs would be Anchor, who's owned by Spotify, by the way, Megaphone, also owned by Spotify, Libsyn, and others, have options for you as a podcaster at the host level to opt into their programmatic ad program. Now, I want to make sure you understand programmatic ads are, just like that word says, programmed. So I want to talk for a minute about the relevance or lack of relevance, is more often what you would experience as a listener, for the ads that are being put on the front of your show. So we've experienced many customers coming to Podetize from other platforms like Megaphone and Anchor. And one of the complaints we often hear is people that are unhappy with the ads being run on the beginning of their show before anybody ever hears anything from them as the host. Their message to the world is delayed until some ads are served. So let's talk about the relevance, though. Programmatic ads, they're very random and, trying to appeal to a wide variety of potential listeners out there. They're not very targeted. And what I mean by relevance is, if you have a show on real estate investing, most often, in fact, I would say pretty much always, those programmatic ads are not going to be something related to real estate investing. Or if you've got a show on business consulting, those ads are probably not going to be relevant to business consulting. And because of this, you will find that, I've experienced some ads just personally from customers coming from other platforms where they have a show that's on, health and wellness, and they're hearing ads on the front of their show for HP Digital Inc. I personally don't even know what HP Digital Inc. is, but if I'm trying to listen to content for health and wellness, chances are I'm probably not really there and interested in hearing about something from HP Digital Inc. Or Google AdWords is another, there are lots of different Google ads out there. And it's not for people to go use Google as a search engine. I think Google pretty well has that covered. I mean, we all use the term go Google it, right? But Google has other kinds of services and things they provide, and they're advertising those to just the widest audience they can find. These are the types of ads that are national brands and maybe more brand awareness campaigns or new products, things like that, that get run in these programmatic ads. They are not going to be relevant to what your show is about. So now let's talk about the cost to you, the podcaster, not monetary cost now. I'm talking the cost to you in audience loss by participating in such a program. We have experienced very real, just real world cases of some of our customers that we produce, because we produce episodes of Advertise for lots of different customers, and they don't have to be hosted on Advertise. Most of them are, but there are some that are hosted on Libsyn, on Megaphone, on Anchor. It happens. And customers come to us and say, hey, you produced my episode. Why are there all these ads? Why are people having to listen to 2 or 3 or more minutes of ads, random ads from all these companies that I'm there before they ever hear me and my content? Why is that happening? Well, you're participating in for one reason or another, and maybe you realized or didn't realize what you're getting into. Maybe you signed up for something, you thought it might be a little different. They said, hey, you can make some money, and you can. We're going to talk about the scale of that amount of money in a minute. But where people are hearing all this random stuff for 2, 3 or more minutes before ever hearing my stuff. And really what you're doing is selling out your audience to these other advertisers and annoying them because they click to listen to your show. They're not getting it right away. They're having to listen to this ad first. Now, yeah, you're going to make a share of money at some point. So let's talk about the monetary reality of that. Is that most of these programs, and I'm sure by the time some of you are listening to this, programs have changed a little bit. But what I've seen in checking them out before recording this episode is that you'll find on average people are going to make somewhere between $12 to $20 per 1,000 downloads of their show, sometimes even less, but I've seen most often somewhere in that range for participating in a programmatic ad program. So that means for your episode, if you get 1,000 downloads, you're going to make $12, maybe less, maybe as much as 20. And you need to decide, is that really worth it to you to inconvenience your audience and make them listen to these ads? Because ultimately it's your choice. Now, not on Spotify, that's different. Spotify will do that to everybody's show, no matter where you're hosted. So that's different. But on all the other apps, it's your choice to participate in these programmatic ad programs to make some money. Now, if you've got a show that's got 100,000 downloads and, you make, let's just say, on the high side, you make $20, and you've got 100,000, so that's $20 times 100, so you'd make about $2,000. Now that's a good chunk of change, and that may very well cover your production cost of your podcast and be worth it to you. But if you don't have tens of thousands of downloads, the amount of money here is so small, it may not be worth it to you. The audience cost to you, the loss of audience for people being annoyed because they wanted to listen to your content, not these ads. They may leave you. It's very different. They may unsubscribe, listen to somebody else, just give up on your show. Now, it's very different if you're going to be putting a different kind of ad within your episodes that's more relevant. That's different, but that's a subject for another episode. We're talking about programmatic ads, programmatic ad costs. So I'm going to stay focused on that, because the programmatic ad, it's like the easiest program to opt into, and every different most podcast platforms are inviting people and enticing them to sign up. But I want you to consider why they're enticing you to sign up, because you're not the only one making money on that. The podcast hosting platform is making money, and in reality making a lot more money than you, because they're doing this across thousands and thousands of shows. So the money's more meaningful to them than it may be to you. And it's really not going to set the world on fire in terms of making you a lot of money unless you have built a really large audience. But I would invite you to consider that what I would call the shotgun approach of programmatic ads that are ads that are not really focused on your topic and are being done across many, many, many shows at the same time are paying less for that opportunity because they know it's a bit of a shotgun approach. It's random whether people are going to be interested to, take advantage of that call to action, to go to that brand, to, look into whether that product or service is. So they're going to pay less for it. If you've got a lot of downloads and you have a audience that is pretty well defined, it's pretty obvious, why people are listening, you can likely make a lot more money with an advertiser that it's looking to reach your specific audience. They'll pay a lot more for the same downloads than a programmatic ad program will. So I also want to make a distinction here and share with you something about a different kind of programmatic ad that is have some more relevance. It's another example a lot of us are familiar with, and I just want to share this to draw a distinction between the podcast hosting platform and the podcast industry programmatic ads and YouTube. So I think many of us are familiar with YouTube, and whether we're big YouTube watchers or occasional YouTube viewers, we've all seen these ads that stream on the beginning. And if you watch along on a video, they'll pause it and interrupt it and play an ad in the middle of it. We've all seen this sort of thing. Well, on YouTube, that is programmatic to an extent, although when you advertise on YouTube as an advertiser, you can say, hey, I want to have my ad featured in videos about these topics, and you that's keyword based. You could say, I could say for advertise, I want to have my video on the front of any video that's talking about launching a podcast, and maybe there's a lot of different phrases and a way that's worded, and I can be on those, so it's more relevant. But what I want you to understand as a podcaster or a aspiring podcaster is that the viewing experience for those ads is very different from a podcast listening experience. It's really important to understand when we're watching a video on YouTube and then the ad is served, it'll say your video, you can skip this ad in so many seconds, or your video will play after so many seconds. So you have a feedback loop that's telling you what to expect, what's coming next. When you're listening to a podcast, you don't have that kind of feedback loop, and it's not so easy to skip. Now, different listening apps will let you skip ahead 30 seconds, but I'm listening when I'm driving in the car, and it's not so easy as I'm concentrating on driving to go and push that. Or I'm at the gym, I'm exercising, and I'm sure not going to do it then, but I'm enjoying listening to content while I'm doing those things. It's a very different experience. And so I just want you to understand, as a content creator, as a podcaster, if you do your episodes or record them as video and publish them on YouTube, you may, if you have enough of a listening audience, want to opt into monetizing your YouTube videos. But it's a very different experience, because at least the ads that you're going to play there are usually a bit more in alignment with the content, and you have a visual feedback loop. Whereas in audio, your listener really doesn't. And it's very frustrating as a podcast listener that, oh my gosh, how many ads am I going to have to listen to before I get to my content? And very often people will say, forget it. And they skip out and they don't finish listening to the ads and ever get to your content. That's why I'm really not a fan, in case that isn't obvious yet, of programmatic ads. I really don't think they serve the listener well. I don't think they serve you, the podcast host, very well, unless you have an awful lot of downloads, and maybe there is a monetary reward that's worth it to you. But I still think the audience cost to you, that negative experience people have, that listening experience, the reality of the fact that these are random things that they didn't really sign up for when opting in to listen to your show, it's probably not worth whatever amount of money you will make on your show, unless your show is a very general random topic. I mean, if you've got, subject matter that's very broad and your audience is not very well defined as to who they are, because your subject matter has such wide appeal, maybe programmatic ads are fine for you. But for most shows that are niche topics, just the misalignment between the random ads that are going to play and your content is usually not worth it. And, remember that audio experience, it's a little more intimate than a visual experience. And the other thing actually I want to share is some programmatic ads that are not just put at the beginning, like are done. There are a lot of these sort of radio networks that are also syndicating their ads through podcasts, or syndicating their shows rather through podcast platforms. And a lot of times those radio networks will randomly, like YouTube does, interrupt the content and just play an ad. And they're not being careful about it. It'll interrupt in the middle of a word. They're not being very discerning or careful about what's a good place to put an ad. They're just 15 minutes in, boom, they're going to run an ad, and that's it. Now, again, in YouTube, when it's a visual experience, a lot of times you'll have a warning saying your video will continue after an ad that's going to play in 3, 2, 1, and then it shows you the ad. So it's coming. It's less frustrating. At least you have a little warning and a feedback loop, but in podcasting, it doesn't do that. If you're not in control of where your ads are placed and choosing the exact locations where ads will go that are after a thought is complete, maybe after a question before an answer is given, that's a logical place, where you got to wait for the question. Wait for the answer after the question. So people will likely hang on because they want to hear the answer to the question. But if you're interrupting in the middle of a word, it's really disruptive, frustrates people, and probably not going to keep, especially new listeners, so that's their first experience, coming back for more. One last sort of tip or recommendation: if you're an aspiring podcaster, somebody who's planning to launch a show but you haven't launched yet, you may want to consider, even if you're going to opt into one of these programmatic ad systems offers that you may get, you may not want to do it from day one because you really haven't built an audience yet. You haven't earned the right to monetize your show. And that's something we talk about on Feed Your Brand a lot is, you really need to build a rapport with the audience. You need to serve that audience a while first and earn the right, to serve them up some ads, promotions, calls to action that you hope or think that they may be interested in. If you do that from day one on your show, it really says that, it makes listeners question what's in it for them by listening. I'm going to hear a lot of these ads. I don't even know if I really want to listen to this show yet. We highly recommend you get your show established, at least start to build an audience, and then, work in some ads over time. The more relevant they can be to your subject matter and topics, the better. But even if they're not going to be, if they're going to be programmatic, I think you've got to build some history of episodes and topics so people can at least go through that list and see, oh, there's some really good stuff they're talking about here. I want to hear that. And at least they're willing to put up with those programmatic ads in order to get that content. They can see a lot of what they're going to get. Doing it from day one is very challenging. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today, is to just raise awareness about what are programmatic ads. What does it really mean? What are some of the pros and cons? Obviously, pros are, yeah, you can earn some money, some, but how much? It's definitely proportional to the number of downloads you have of your show. And so if you don't have a lot of downloads, you're not going to get a whole lot of money. And so, the cons are, is it worth it to sell out your audience? Because I think that's how listeners, quite honestly, would feel about it, that they're not really trying to provide me value as a listener. They're trying to make money from these advertisers. And that's just an unfortunate situation that may make it a bit of a tougher hill to climb for you to build that audience that hopefully you're wanting to serve and maybe benefit from in the future. There just may be a better way to do it. Okay. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Hope that was helpful. There'll be a future episode where we talk about different kinds of advertising and monetary opportunities. So, hang on for that in the future. But for today, that's what I wanted to share with you. You can find the blog post for this episode with details and links to things I discussed at advertise.com. So please go and check that out under Feed Your Brand in the top menu. And we'll be back next week with another great episode. Until then, this is Tom signing off on Feed Your Brand. Okay, so that is the episode portion, and welcome everybody that's here. Well, we had some different crew. A lot of people changed out over the course of that. Programmatic ads may not have been a very popular topic today for our customers who are here live in the webinar. Cody, we have any engagement or questions on social?
No engagement or questions so far, but seems like we're
Very
doing
good.
okay. It's still
We've got
streaming.
a hand raised. Claire has a question. So
Oh,
Claire,
yeah.
I'm going to allow you to talk. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, so this was very helpful, but I'm curious about ads that are a better match for our audience. Like, we don't have a huge audience yet, but we're pretty niche. So what would be a good way to approach sponsors or people who'd want to advertise? And like, how do you even determine what a good rate would be?
Good questions. Claire, forgive me because I just deal with so many different people. Remind me of the topic or subject matter of your show.
Yeah, our shows go behind the ballot and we talk about Texas politics. Yeah.
That's
and then we
right.
do it in series. So like we do a public education for 7 weeks, elections. So I could see nonprofits that really fit into those topics, but I'm like, how do I have this conversation with them?
Okay. So good question. So when you have a very niche show and you also drop series of episodes in sort of groups or seasons, things like that, what I would call limited run topics, you're not just publishing every week like clockwork on a regular schedule. It sounds like that's more you. Is that right?
Yeah, like for this first 7 weeks, we talked about public education, and the next 7 weeks, I mean, we are regular, like Mondays and Thursdays, but we are kind of grouping them in limited runs. It's actually a good way to describe it.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of opportunities for you to consider. Which ones are really going to be in alignment with your goals would be up to you. But you will definitely do better reaching out to potential sponsors that you know of, who you know are in very much in alignment with the topics, like the education subject ones. There's probably some companies out there would very much like to be featured on those episodes, and you can broker those kind of deals yourselves and establish a flat fee for them to be on those episodes, either permanently or for a period of time. I would always first recommend you try to get it for only a period of time. And then those episodes don't have to be in those episodes permanently, or sorry, those ads don't have to be in those episodes permanently. It allows you to sell that space to someone else in the future, because even though they're old episodes, when people find your show new, they're going to likely go back and listen to old episodes too. So that's a new play for whoever's listening to it at that time. And you want them to be hearing a current relevant ad, not an old outdated one. And plus it allows you to keep making money on old shows for new listeners. But what rate? In your case, I definitely, especially when your audience is smaller and you don't have a lot of download history, that you can say, hey, across all my episodes, I get 10,000 plays a month or 20,000 plays a month or whatever it is. In the early days, when you have less, I definitely recommend trying to negotiate a flat fee. And that, again, for a period of time, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, that could be $800, $1,000, what you can, it can make it whatever you want it to be. It's just a matter of negotiation. I know there are others on this call that don't do kind of that seasonal thing or dropping a group of episodes at once, but they're more established for years in podcasting and have sponsors cycling through on a regular basis. They'll broker deals for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days of an advertiser. And then, the more, how do I say, the more episodes they have, the more listens they have per month, they charge more and more. I mean, I, on my own shows, have charged a single sponsor as much as, for a month, like $6,500, but it was a lot of episodes and I had a lot more plays for just a month. And then I've had others where I would sponsor a limited series of episodes that was a special drop. It was 25 episodes, but only 12 of them were new. 13 of them were sort of updated and republished episodes. And I think Tracy and I got like $30,000 for that type of program. But you could see, like, on a per episode basis, that would be more like, $1,200 or something, but you did a series. So I can't give you an absolute formula to go and say, this is what you should charge. It's very situational for the demand in terms of a show like yours, how many listeners you have, and what kind of advertisers in alignment. Now, having said that, because you have a show that, at least from appearances, looks like related to politics and people, voting. I mean, at certain times a year and certain years, obviously with our election cycles coming up, there is tons of money being spent on, for political candidates. So I don't know how much a political candidate would be interested to advertise on your show, but those kinds of buys, there are agencies placing those, and getting in touch with some of the agencies that specialize in political advertising might be helpful for you. Is that helpful? Is there any follow-up you might have?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I guess the one follow-up I have is that I went to this summit recently. It was more tailored for journalists, but we still learned some things. And they talked about bundling, like maybe bundling a newsletter ad. And I was thinking with a podcast ad. Have y'all done things like that too in the past that have made it easier to get that dollar value?
Absolutely. Especially when you have lower listenership. Definitely bundling with ads on your website, because you're going to get random traffic from Google, just people searching and coming into your blogs for your episodes. So you can have sidebars there with ads for sponsors, same sponsors that are all advertising on your on your audio, but you can definitely for web and newsletters, absolutely put all that together. And I would also be spinning your audience. Instead of how many downloads or how much web traffic you have, talk about your total reach as a show. What is your total reach of audience? And that would be your social media connections, your web traffic, and your downloads. Now, we have some comments that I think may also be relevant and helpful to you here. Scott's saying he made a list of all the vendors that he uses as a company and people he already promotes, reach outs to them and offered up a flat fee of $1,000 per month. And he gave them one sponsored episode a month. And he was doing daily episodes at the time. So basically he charges $1,000 for a single sponsored episode. That's another approach. And then he says all four of them were sponsors, all started their own podcasts as they found value in being on his. So they're no longer sponsors, but he has an affiliate relationship with them. So that's an interesting thing, is that, Scott's a master marketer and monetizes everything that he does. So I think what that second comment of Scott's points out, that you can get very creative with this. It is still advertising on podcasts, or even I would say on podcast brands. And to me, what that means to me is you're extending beyond your actual audio show to your website, to your social channels, to anywhere you have reach, your newsletter. I would think even, LinkedIn newsletters are very popular now too. And while there are probably some rules there, I'm sure you could mention sponsors and have links to sponsors in those too. Scott would probably have some experience with that. So chime in if you think I'm wrong there, Scott. But definitely having talk about your total reach, your total audience, and when you have low listenership, don't get hung up on that. Don't volunteer. I have this many downloads per episode because it's probably not going to help you. You're saying you're offering a sponsorship package inclusive of all these things, and we have a total audience reach of X. Probably is a more interesting, attractive number, and you will be able to charge more for it. So get creative, and don't be, even as a new show, depending on what you're going to offer them. If, like Scott said, hey, you're giving them, you're selling exposure on a single episode, well, you could charge more if it's going to live permanently in that episode. I don't know if that would be of value to the sponsor. Some it might be, some it might not. But if it's going to live there forever, charge more for it. And especially if it's an early episode, because statistically, your earliest episodes of your podcast get the most listens of any episode, because people find your show in the future. If they like it, they always go back and listen to the beginning and listen to the first 6-10 episodes. Even if they then skip ahead, they're always going to listen to the early ones. And so putting ads in those early ones, it's kind of a premier position you can charge more for. So I hope that's helpful. Good questions.
Yeah, Tracy also brings up about, what about paid placements? You do have to disclose those. Your first page on Google placements is what she was talking about.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Cody.
She was saying, what about paid placements?
Tracy said that?
Yeah, she's commenting from your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
What
about paid placements?
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, all these are paid sponsorships are paid placements. So I don't know what the distinction is there.
Got it.
I wish she were, well, Tracy, if you're hearing this, elaborate, please. And I'll be happy to. I don't see it. I'm on LinkedIn. Where did she comment that?
I have it on my restream.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing it. Okay. Huh. Well, anyway, I'm afraid I don't know exactly what she's referring to. I mean, you can also, there's so many here. What's a good example, I think, to look at in terms of ways to offer sponsors value, and you can have more things to sell should you have either multiple potential sponsors to sell to, or should you want to be able to get more money from them. I always look to events, like in-person events. The people that sell sponsorships and monetize these are monetizing everything they possibly can. And they're making up all these packages where, oh, you're the badge sponsor. So if you have, you have a badge holder, and a lot of times they have a place where you can have a sponsor and you're featured on that. And then you have the lanyard sponsor and you're printed on the lanyard. And then they have, it's like every which way they can slice and dice their event and offer a way for somebody to sponsor something. And you can think about things like that with your podcast also, because if they want a host mention within the episode, you can have, where you would have, let's say at the very beginning, if it's in your pre-recorded intro, the Go Behind the Ballot podcast sponsored by so-and-so. And you could do that for a period of time. And on Advertise, we have a system where you have your pre-recorded intro and outro. You can change that and update that, and even retroactively on all your shows without having to re-edit anything. That's just software. So you could do that for a period of time. So even if you have one advertiser with a real ad spot within it, then you could have another sponsor that's, sort of the overall, this episode is brought to you by so-and-so. So think about all the different ways you could possibly break it down. Now, okay, Cody mentioned, oh yeah, another thing you can do, we have a new app that we're bringing out. First to you, our customers who are already working with us, you're going to get the first peek at that later this month. And it's called Pod Lister, and it will be opened up to the public in 1st of January. And among other things, we have every podcast in existence in our database. And one of the things we're doing is creating a score that's kind of like a credit score for each podcast based on a lot of different criteria that is in a formula that calculates. And it's on a 1,000-point scale. And you'll be able to use your Pod Lister score when that's available to help show, value of your podcast, because it's not just based on your downloads. It does take into consideration your website, your keyword rankings, your backlinks, for the website, but many other aspects of your podcast as well, not just downloads. So it's trying to give a broader look at the value of a show, and that may help you in the future as well. Paid guest spots Tracy's talking about. Okay, that's helpful. So Claire, that I don't know, do you have guests on your show regularly? I wonder.
Yeah, we do have guests.
I'm hearing more and more about shows, and some of our customers too, that are actually charging guests to be on the show as another way to make money. And some of them are doing it in a how do I say, in a capitalistic way where, who was I talking to just this morning, where they're literally charging over $5,000 per guest to be on the show. Now, the show is very well established and it's a big exposure opportunity. And I'm trying to remember, it's one of our customers, but anyway, and then there are others that are more nonprofit that are doing it. They're not making it a gate for the guest to get in the door, but after they've got a guest engaged, interested in being a guest, they're saying, hey, I would like for you to at least consider making a contribution to the show to help support it, of like $250. I believe that Karina Belize of Care More Be Better is doing that and finding most of her guests willing to contribute in that sense. So less of a requirement and more of a suggestion. That, depending on certain shows and situations, might be another consideration. But I'm always blown away by these event creators where it's like, oh, you're the oh, you can sponsor and put something in the bag that they're giving away to every member. You could be the bag sponsor and have your name on the bag. And I think if we think about our podcasts, our websites, our social platforms, I mean, we have our groups on LinkedIn, Facebook, all these things. You could put up a banner. You could put up a banner that, is your big graphic on your group on LinkedIn or Facebook. And if it's for your show, it could be, have the logo for your sponsor be up there too. And that gives them benefit because it's not just everybody listening to an episode, but anybody who happens to visit that page on your social account, so you could be selling different things either as a part of a big package or as, piecing it out and selling different things to different sponsors as ways to make more money. And so that would be really good. So yeah, Scott's always a great contributor and been with us for a long time. He's a master marketer. So keep Scott in mind. Scott Carson, maybe connect with him on LinkedIn or Facebook. He's everywhere. So, if you have more questions, feel free to check out with him. Master marketer who actually resisted podcasting for more than a year. The first time I met him at an event and he was doing all these videos on YouTube and on social. And he's like, nah, I don't want to podcast. and he didn't think there was enough benefit out of it. And it took about a year, but then he really ended up coming around to realize he was missing an opportunity by not podcasting. And now he's been doing it so much. He's like 600 episodes in, and he's doubled down. He's all into podcasts as well as all the other stuff. So Tracy's saying the edge of NFT. And Edge of NFT is another podcast that does all sorts of different monetization. So yeah, that's a good suggestion to model, Tracy. Thank you. All right, Cody, seeing anything else out there?
Nothing else right now.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting topic. I feel like some people are getting a lot of value, and others, I cleared the room with this one after a while. But maybe that actually speaks to programmatic ads a little bit. I just don't think they're that valuable for most shows. I really don't. You're welcome, Claire. Thank you for joining today. Appreciate it. All right. Well, hey, I don't see any more questions, so I'll sort of make this last call. I don't need to keep talking on the air, filling the last 10 minutes of the hour if we don't have any questions or comments. So last call on social media. Cody, keep an eye out. Let me know if there's any questions.
Of course.
And if not, we'll wrap it up. So what's on tap for next week while we're waiting on that, Cody? Do we know?
We have a couple options to go over, me and you,
Okay.
but we are coming on next week. We don't have it solidified right now.
Okay. All right. But we have a few topics we're considering.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. One of them would be defining or redefining your podcast categories. So talking about listings or residual value of blog creation for Google creators from Google creators. So.
Okay. We'll think about
different
those.
Topics to talk about. Yeah.
All right. Don't sound like the most engaging topics, though. I want to think about that. We'll see.
Put our heads together. We'll come up with something.
Yeah, we always do. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any more comments. I think we'll wrap it up for this week. This is the first Wednesday in November. Can you believe it? I can't believe it's November. Holy mackerel. Things are moving along quickly in 2022. So next week, come on back, folks. Another hopefully engaging topic. And if you're looking for any support, you having any specific challenges, come and ask those questions too. What we talk about here in the Q&A does not need to be specifically relevant to what we talked about in the episode recording. So keep that in mind. And thank you all for participating. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to reach out if you have any questions after the fact. We'll be happy to answer them. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next week.